I think, honestly, the scariest thing about death is that we're leaving everything that we know and love here on earth, and we're going to a completely different place. Now, we do know that God's in heaven, and that gives us hope that we will be going somewhere great, but it's still really scary. Like, this year I'm a freshman, and when I came into high school, I knew that this school was going to be good, but I was still really scared because I didn't know what it was going to be like. So I think whenever there's like a big change, and then when you're unsure of what the change is exactly going to be, it's terrifying. And that goes the same thing with death, but it's on such a larger scale because you're going from one life to the next.
I think a big part of it is that there is something, after you die. There's the whole, you go to heaven, and that while death, you're not alone. You got Jesus there with you. God's gonna take care of you.
We are people of hope because whatever your condition may be, you just have to see the light at the end of the tunnel and see God's plan for you. Whether it is going to heaven and seeing that, then that is your hope. Or if it's knowing that you could get through it and that's God's plan for you, then that is the hope that you could find.
I don't think we ever die alone because I feel like in our last few hours and moments of death, we are connected to all of our family members, living and deceased, are all there in spirit with us, even if they're not physically there. And I feel like God's with us all the time. Most definitely He's there with us in our darkest hour. So no, I don't feel like we ever will die alone.
Death. It is inevitable for each one of us. This we know for sure.
But when, where, and how we will die is unknown to us.
At least, that's the way it used to be.
Some people know when, where, and how they will die because they plan their death.
They believe they have the right to die if they want, and the right to kill themselves to avoid the fear, pain, and suffering that often accompanies a terminal illness.
This practice is called physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia.
It is legal in a few states in the United States and some countries around the world.
So, what is the Catholic perspective on this right to die option?
Is death something to be decided on our own terms or on God's?
Facing death in God's time. That's what we'll be talking about today. Hi everyone, I'm Emily.
And I'm Thomas.
And this is Realfaith TV.
We'd like to thank the students from Donovan Catholic in Toms River, New Jersey for helping us open the show today.
And for sharing some of their thoughts on death and the hope in seeing God at the end of our earthly lives.
We'll talk with another member of their campus ministry later as a part of our Wild Card segment.
Today's spotlight guest is Phillip Johnson, a transitional deacon in the Diocese of Raleigh.
He made headlines last year when he wrote an open letter to Brittany Menard, the 29-year-old who was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer and was told she had just 6 months to live.
Her story went viral on news outlets and social media, and she became an advocate for the Death with Dignity cause.
In his letter, Phillip described his own struggle with terminal brain cancer and how he has chosen a different path to confronting his own mortality.
We met up with him at St. Charles Borromeo Seminary in Philadelphia. Let's hear his story now.
I was born in Greensboro, North Carolina, and after high school, I went to the United States Naval Academy. I wanted to be in the military, but I also wanted to go to college before joining. So after the Naval Academy, I was commissioned as an officer, and I served for 3 years as a gunnery officer on 2 different ships and went on 2 deployments to the Northern Arabian Gulf. It was while I was in the middle of my second deployment that I started having seizures. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. A scan of my brain showed that I had a tumor, and it turned out to be brain cancer. So it really changed my whole life. I had to get out of the Navy. I'd been thinking about the priesthood for about 4 years, and I'd planned on coming to the seminary after my commitment was over with the military. So I went to my bishop in Raleigh, Bishop Michael Burbage, and I told him I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know why God would allow me to get so sick when I wanted to serve him as a priest, but that I still wanted to go to the seminary and pursue my vocation. And he let me come up. The doctors told me after a biopsy that I would probably only live about 2 years, and this was about 6 or 7 years ago. As far as day-to-day life, I don't have seizures anymore. I'm on medication for that, but you get very tired. It's hard to concentrate. I have to sleep a lot during the day. So it's just kind of month by month now. I go back every few months to the doctor to have scans and to have checkups and to make sure everything's okay.
He's put up with a lot in his life, and he's a very brave and respectable man for that.
Well, let's see what our studio guests have to say about this topic.
Okay, they are
Joe,
Mike,
Danny,
Lauren.
and Caroline. So guys, have you ever known anyone who was dying or diagnosed with a terminal illness?
Yeah, my dad's aunt actually, a couple years ago, she had an accident where she fell down the steps and she fractured some of her vertebrae and she was paralyzed from the waist down. Her condition started getting worse and eventually she underwent a surgery procedure that had complications that it made her sick. She was suffering an immense amount. And it's like a situation like that when you think to yourself, like, yeah, I want her to persevere, I want her to live, and I want her to hope for that she will get better, but at the same time, I don't want to see her go through all this suffering, you know? So it's like situations like that make the whole dying with dignity topic kind of complicated.
Several years ago, I had a brother who passed away of leukemia in the bone marrow. He was diagnosed when he was 3 years old, and they only gave him a couple of months to live, but he wound up surviving for about 1.5 years, and he passed away just before he turned 5.
My cousin Scott had pancreatic cancer, and my grandfather died from complications from Parkinson's disease.
My grandfather, he died when I was very, very young. He had ALS, which is an awful disease. It slowly kills you. It starts at your extremities. It starts cutting off nerve endings and motor capabilities, and it slowly works its way up until you're totally paralyzed.
Yeah, my grandmother, 2 years ago, she had smoked for 64 years since she was 12 years old, and she was diagnosed with stage 3B lung cancer in February of 2013, and she died 9 months later in November.
Thank you guys so much for sharing that. I know that we all have experienced some kind of loss, and it's part of life, but again, it is really complicated to talk about.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It's a tough topic to talk about. To understand the issue of physician-assisted suicide, we first need to look at the Catholic perspective on life and death.
We view human life as a sacred gift from God.
Life is to be protected from its natural beginning, at conception to its natural end, death.
It is not up to us to tamper with either end of the spectrum of human life,
no matter what the circumstances are.
Next, our spotlight guest, Deacon Phil Johnson, recounts when he first received his prognosis that he had less than 2 years to live,
and how he decided to follow his call to enter the seminary to become a Catholic priest.
I was devastated. I remember I went into a church and just started crying. I had all these plans that I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be a priest. It seemed like none of that would be possible anymore. But right after you're diagnosed with something that serious, there is a feeling where sometimes you want the disease to progress and take your life. You don't want to suffer anymore. So while I wasn't thinking about committing suicide, there were times when, especially in the beginning, where I hoped that it would speed up and just hurry up and kill me. That's the attitude that a lot of people take. But over time, you see really the blessings that are inherent in the illness. You're able to help a lot of people who are going through the same thing. But you know, suicide is made out of depression, it's made out of desperation, it's made out of fear. And that's not the state of mind to be in when you're making really the most important decision of your life. I think thinking of the Passion of Christ, a lot of times when I'm hurting, I will think about like the Garden of Gethsemane. You know, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, but yours be done. That's a constant prayer that I have to remind myself of when I don't understand what's going on. I think I transitioned to a different mindset through prayer. I met with my parish priest. He said, I don't know why I think this, but I think you're going to beat this thing. So he really gave me a lot of hope. And then I met with my bishop. I expected to have to beg him to take me into the seminary. So I went to him and said, Bishop, the doctors are saying I might only live about 2 years, 3 years. I know it takes about 6 or 7 to get through the seminary, and who knows what's going to happen after that. And I'll never forget his words. He said, "Philip, if God is calling you to the seminary right now, who am I to stand in the way?" And I'll be forever thankful to him for that.
It's amazing how hope helped to get him through. And we are people of hope. So guys, how does hope fit into the idea of death or suffering?
Well, one way is, we hope that there's a better thing to come after death. We hope that, we go to heaven.
I know we as Catholics believe that, whenever we have suffering, we should unite with Christ's suffering. So I believe that's kind of a way that we can have hope.
Yeah, I think that when we're suffering, we either hope that we'll get cured and get better, or we hope that our suffering will end quickly and that we will die. But I think that hope plays a huge role.
Now let's meet our first wildcard guest, Abby, a student at Donovan Catholic.
She'll share how she struggled to find God's love in the death of a close family member.
Let's hear her now.
It can be difficult to see God's love in a time of death, especially for a loved one. My dad died in August and he was sick for a while. He had heart problems. It's really difficult. I'm not used to having to go to just my mom for stuff. And she has to take care of me and my brother now. And she doesn't have that extra voice to go to when something happens between the two of us. And I don't have my dad to go to when I get upset with my mother. So it's really difficult having to adjust to life without my dad. Even though I miss my dad every day, I'm glad that he's in a better place so he doesn't have to feel his pain anymore.
It's extremely hard to live without a parent, but as long as we have faith and hope that he or she are in heaven with God, then we know that it's all going to be okay.
Yeah, our faith can really help us look at death with different eyes.
Right. Not only does Christ change how we look at death, he changes how we look at suffering.
By his passion and death on the cross, Christ has given a new meaning to suffering.
The suffering of a cancer patient, the pain of an injured veteran,
the heartache of a mother who loses a child can all be united to Christ's suffering on the cross.
His suffering conquered death and opened the gates of heaven for us.
Next, Deacon Philip describes some of the challenges he faces by groups promoting doctor-assisted suicide and euthanasia as a remedy to quickly end suffering.
He also shares his experience in writing the open letter to Brittany Menard, appealing to her to reconsider the decision to take her own life.
And he shares what kind of a reaction his letter received and comments about the slippery slope we are headed down if we continue to legalize physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia.
There's a group called Compassion and Choices, and what they're dedicated to doing is making physician-assisted suicide legal in all 50 states. And that's the group that really got behind Brittany Maynard, helped her make the videos, gave her a website. They were really glamorizing her decision. They didn't offer the other side of why you shouldn't kill yourself when you're sick. So I really felt like I had a good opportunity to share my story, to help those in her situation, in our situation, when that's the only voice that they're hearing is that you should kill yourself if you're going to be suffering. Through her video, she was saying that life's not worth living anymore because you're going to die earlier than you thought or because you're suffering more than you thought. But there's still a lot more to life. You still have your dignity. That doesn't change with illness or with age or with anything. I know that the president of Compassion and Choices read it. I went on CNN and talked with her on one of the talk shows, but I'm not sure if Brittany read it herself before she died. I received a lot of emails supporting me. There are a lot of emails telling me to leave her alone. There were some really great emails that came in that I think made people look at the issue in a different light and realize that there is a lot of good that can come from suffering. One disturbing fact is that, for example, Brittany Maynard, on her death certificate, there's no mention of taking the medicine. The cause of death was listed as brain cancer. They list the cause of death as what you were suffering from when you decided to kill yourself. We also really have to look at other countries that introduced this practice before us. Belgium is one, the Netherlands is another. They started allowing physician-assisted suicide, and it's just been a slippery slope downhill. They've allowed more and more and more things. Now it's legal, I believe in the Netherlands, to euthanize a born child up until 6 years of age if he has a genetic disorder. And all of these things are just compounding.
Can you offer any insight to people who are suffering and thinking about ending their lives? And also, do you think people should have the right to commit suicide and take their life if they choose to do so?
After hearing what he said, and we were talking before the show that in Belgium, something like 650 babies, children under the age of 6, were euthanized because they had a deformity. And, it's just unthinkable that a parent is willing to say, they would rather have their child die.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the secular culture's view of death and suffering is at odds with what we believe as Catholics.
Without faith, death is the end. Without faith, suffering is pointless.
Yet with Christ, death brings us to judgment and union with Him in heaven.
Next, Deacon Philip discusses the real aha moments he has encountered in his journey as a priest and ministering to the sick and suffering.
And how through his suffering, he is united to Christ.
I had a lot of really aha moments. I think the first would be that my bishop actually allowed me to come to the seminary, that I lived long enough to become a deacon. I was just ordained back in April. Really, the place I see God is the way that I've changed, the way that I've become more compassionate to those who are sick. I do a lot of work with the sick in hospitals and nursing homes. I'm not a young man in his 20s that's never experienced suffering anymore, which is often what frustrated sick people will say, "What do you know about suffering?" But I'm able to empathize with them, and that's really, really helpful. It's really beautiful. I've really grown in my faith. I've been able to pray more, and my family's been brought closer together. A lot of my family members who have not been very practicing of their faith have come back to the church. They've gone to confession. They're receiving the sacraments now. These are the real miracles I see. I think a lot of people believe that life isn't worth living if you're not completely happy and you don't have everything that you want and you're completely free of pain, but there's no life like that. By suffering in the world, you really are united to Christ in a very intimate way that it's hard to explain unless you've been suffering along with Him, how united you feel with Him. We're going to have suffering. That's why we need the Lord, that's why we need God, to learn how to deal with it, to offer up suffering and to learn to grow closer to Christ when we suffer, and to learn that we can actually be happy when we suffer. I am happy, even though I have a terminal illness. It's hard to explain. I just want to be a priest. I think that's the only goal I have. I've wanted to be a priest since I was 19 years old, and I'm only 1 year away now, so I'm very thankful to God for giving me this chance. It's the most beautiful thing I can imagine doing in life. So,
going through something like that really helps you to see the blessings in your life and helps you be thankful for that. And it's seriously inspirational how he can find happiness in his suffering.
He's definitely been blessed to get this far. Let's meet our wildcard guest, Abby, who will talk about how her friendship with her classmate has grown since learning about his terminal illness.
Starting my freshman year, I had a friend who had every single class with me. We always had the same periods. We got to know each other quite quickly, and after a year of knowing each other, he told me something very surprising, that he was diagnosed about 2 years ago with a terminal cancer. And still, through everything, I didn't know it. He was the happiest person, the brightest person that I've ever met in my entire life. He would make me laugh more than anyone could possibly make me laugh. And when I found out that this person could be taken from me at any moment, it was the scariest thing. And I'm so blessed to have had him in my life as I did. I'm so happy that he is still alive today. And even though you might not know someone for such a long period of time, it's just the fact that they might have in your life that might change the whole picture of it.
As Catholic Christians, we believe physician-assisted suicide is wrong, whether the law protects the practice or not.
We believe life and death are in God's hands.
And we believe that God walks with us through the good and the bad times,
especially in the times we suffer.
Brittany Menard did not see suffering and death through the same lens we do.
She chose to end her life on her own terms in November of 2014, leaving behind a husband, mother, stepfather, and several other close family members and cousins.
Brittany viewed her dignity and value based on what she could do instead of who she was, a beloved daughter of God.
Our spotlight guest, Deacon Philip, is courageously embracing his suffering, seeking treatment and healing, and leaving his time of death in God's hands.
Finally, he shares some advice for those who are facing terminal illness,
and how prayer has guided him through his most difficult days to find joy and happiness in his suffering.
I think I became closer to God since I found out I had cancer. I was still a little lukewarm in my faith, like most people in their 20s. But when you're faced with such a horrible disease, it's hard not to turn to God. You realize how little control you have over your own life. You feel like you're in control when you're young. You don't think that anything can happen to you. You think that cancer and serious diseases are things that you get when you're older and that you have time to do whatever you want. But it really brought me closer to God. It made me trust in Him more, and I'm really thankful for that. I think through prayer and through seeing how God has been with me this whole time has really strengthened me to trust that I'll be alive as long as I need to be alive to accomplish whatever it is that He wants me to do. I'm really confident about this. So it's hard to be sad about dying when you can see the hand of God in your work. All the people I've been able to help because I was sick, I wouldn't take away any of those experiences. I wouldn't take away the fact that my family came back to the church. An illness can seem like a blessing if you choose to see it in that light. I'd like to spend a large portion of my priesthood with those who are dying, with those who feel abandoned, with those who are lonely, because now I've been there and I know what it's like and I know how horrible it is sometimes. When you think of suffering, I mean, God sent His Son to suffer for us. So any suffering that we have, we can unite to Jesus on the cross. It used to be talked about maybe 30 or 40 years ago. You know, parents would always tell us to offer up our suffering. This is what's called redemptive suffering, that if we use our suffering as a sort of prayer, if we're uncomfortable, if we're hurting, we can pray for other people, we can offer this suffering for other people. And it is a sort of prayer. It unites you to the cross and it unites you to Christ.
It's amazing how his relationship with God helped him to get through the suffering. So what do you guys think? How can someone's relationship with God help them to face death in God's time?
I definitely think that someone's view on death definitely depends on how strong their relationship and their faith is with God.
I think it's important to understand that there might be suffering when you die, but that's an opportunity for you to be like Christ. You know, I mean, He was crucified, but that wasn't it. He was also tortured and He was heckled, and as we face death, you know, we can align ourselves to Christ.
But it's important to realize that it's human to not want to suffer at the end of your life. It's human to just want to be able to pass away without the pain. My great aunt, she was very religious. She had a very close relationship with God. Her brother was a priest. Her sisters were all nuns. And, you know, she prayed to God that she would be able to die with dignity. And that's what makes it so complicated, because while some people pray that, you know, they survive and that they live through this ordeal, others pray that they simply die with dignity. And that's what makes this whole situation just so complicated, because there's different levels of suffering.
You know, it's not easy. Nothing about death is easy for us to understand. We just wanted to thank Deacon Philip for his amazing story of faith.
As Catholics, we should leave the life and death decisions in God's hands. In Romans chapter 14, we read,
"None of us lives to himself, and none of us dies to himself.
If we live to the Lord, and if we die to the Lord.
So then, whether we live or whether we die, we are the Lord's."
We must remember that we all have a path guided by God.
Our work here on earth is not complete until He calls us home.
As you can see, the slippery slope of the Right to Die movement has opened up a new front on what St. John Paul II deemed a culture of death.
As we face growing hostility towards preserving life at all stages, let us stand united in faith and reach out to those who are suffering,
to help them see God's love and allow Christ to carry them to natural death.
So, how are you being called to help those who are suffering?
We'd love to hear from you.
Contact us at realfaithtv.com.
Or share your thoughts with us on Twitter.
And we'll leave you today with these words of Pope Francis on this issue.
It was unlawful to take a life and warned of the dangers posed to the elderly by hidden euthanasia in our culture of waste.
The lack of health or the fact of one's disability are never valid reasons for exclusion or, what is worse, the elimination of persons.
Your work wants to witness by word and by example that human life is always sacred, valuable, and inviolable.
And as such, it must be loved, defended, and cared for.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time on
Realfaith TV.
God bless.